Hey, welcome, folks, to another episode of the Upriver Crawfish. I'm your host, Sankar. Today is October 22nd. This is a Saturday, and I will go ahead and bring you the Sitrep from the Special Military Operations in Ukraine. It's still a Special Military Operations. What I'm going to do today and then going forward is I'm going to use this map because it's not updating as much with Russian advances. As I told you guys before, this is a pro-Ukraine map, and they will show advances for the any Ukrainian advances. They show it pretty quickly, but with Russian advances, they take their time to update the map. But so what I would do, I'll still use this map every now and then. But I will use this mainly in the beginning to give you an orientation of what I will be talking about. Then I will go to some more detailed maps to be able to bring you guys the information. So again, as always, if it's your first time here, I start off showing the whole of Ukraine. This is Ukraine, the whole of Ukraine. This part here is Crimea. These areas here in pink are the areas where the Russians currently have. These areas in gray were areas the Russians were and then withdrew. This is the Lugansk area, the Donetsk area. This here was Kharkov, which Russia had before. And then this is Zaporizhia and then Kherson. So as we talk about this front, we'll be talking about these areas along here around the Lugansk area, northern Donetsk area, the Zaporizhia, and Kherson. So we'll break this front down to Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. So that's how we begin. So let me go ahead and then begin with the other map. I will start off with the Donetsk and Lugansk area because there are some activities there. But today's Sitrep is going to be, as far as the military part, is going to be specific to the Kherson area. And then we talk about other things on the geopolitical front, and then also about Russia's actions that they may take once the forces that have been mobilized, once they have been brought onto the front. Okay, so stay with me. So let's begin with the northern Donetsk and Lugansk area. This area where this was a little part of Kharkov. So let's begin with that. Remember, when the Ukrainians came, they took over some places they took Krasny Liman, and then they took Kupiansk, which is around here, and those areas that were in Kharkov before. And one of their goals now is to get to Svatovo and eventually get down to Starobilsk. Also, they want to take over the town of Kremenaya here. So that was the goal. But the Russians have fortified that line. So from Kremenaya to Svatovo, this area has been fortified by the Russians. In fact, the Russians have been making advances up here to the north of Kupiansk. They've been making, I will call these counterstrokes, making counterstrokes to taking a little bit more positions here. And if I'm not mistaken, besides Voroshny up here that they have taken, they have now come either very close to Voroshna or have taken Voroshna in this area. The Ukrainians, their goal, again, still trying to use what they thought worked before, which was instead of coming on a head-on assault into a city that the Russians were defending, they would try to come along the supply routes. and cut them off to come at the back and hit the headquarters. That's a plan that the U.S. put in place, that a U.S. lieutenant had come out with to defeat the battalion tactical groups, because they felt that they were low on infantry power. So to take advantage of that is to try to go behind the lines and try to I mean, it's not a bad move to try to go behind the lines and try to cut off their supply lines and then get at the headquarters before it's too late and make them move. So they did some of these things before in Kharkov, but the Russians actually didn't want to hold those lines because, again, manpower. So the Russians obviously stayed for a little bit, killed a lot of Ukrainian forces, and then pulled back. So that was the plan. But now the Russians have strengthened this line. This Svatovo is like a triangle here. So Svatovo, Starobilsk, and Kremenaya. These lines have been strengthened. And the Russians are now moving up here and taking more positions. But also down here, before, in the Ukrainians had Debrova. They had actually gotten all the way here to Debrova, taking this area, like Yampolovsky, Terny, all those places. They had taken it, and they were close to Kremenaya. But and this was General Lapin's forces, have steadily pushed back to seize Terny, Yampolovska, and Zarechny, Torska, and Debrova. They are retaking these areas. They pushed actually the Ukrainian forces out of the Zheribets river. So that's what has happened in the northern Donbass area around Kupiansk and around this Svatovo, Kremenaya front. So the Svatovo and Kremenaya is down here. So all along here, this is a triangle area that they're protecting. The Ukrainians would like to push through from the north here and cut off Zvatovo, and then push on this line as well. Push on these lines to cut off this road from Kremenaya. So there will be, if they could manage to cut through this line, this is the main route between Kremenaya and Zvatovo. This Kremenaya-Zvatovo highway, they would like to cut that, and then they can get these forces here, will move on to cut off communication routes for Kremenaya, and then these forces will attack more to draw some of the Kremenaya defense on this side, while other forces try to exploit that area. Not a bad chance, except that when the Russians want to defend an area, the Ukrainians can do nothing. It's a matter of whether the Russians want to defend that area or not. And from what it's looking like now, the Ukrainian offensive that they have been talking about, that whole Kharkov offensive, has run out of steam. And they might find themselves extended for problems that may come later, that the Russians might bring to them later. So that's what's happening on that front. And let me move on to the next front. Okay, now we're in the area where somewhere around, let's say, I want to call this West Central Donetsk, but I mean, I might be getting that coordination wrong. But it's not Northern Donetsk now. It's more down in the central area. So this area here is Bakhmut. This is Solidar. This is Siversk. Remember, these three towns have a lot of fortifications there, and they made up what earlier in the year it was being called the Zelensky line or Zelensky defense line. Right? This area is being attacked by the Wagner musicians. You know, the Wagner orchestra, the Wagner paramilitary units. They have been attacking this area, and they have now entered. For a long time, they entered just a small part of it, and they were on Patrice Lumumba Street, which I was very happy about. Anyways, but one of the things that they did this time is that they took over the areas with the industrial areas. They push into the areas with the industrial areas first, and pushing into those areas, the industrial areas, they were able to dislodge the Ukrainian forces from there. Now, why is this significant? As you remember, in Severodonetsk, in Mariupol, especially in Mariupol, when the Ukrainian forces got beaten, they went into those industrial areas. Those industrial areas they're very built up, and they have underground catacombs and stuff that people can go and stay, and it'll be hard to get them out. But this time the Russian forces took those areas first, pushing them back more into the center of Bakhmut, into the residential areas, and now they're going to fight there. There are various reports that Ukrainian forces are moving. Some of them are moving from there back to Kramatorsk. Kramatorsk, by the way, is the command center of I call it the Ukrainian forces in the Donbass area. That's the main command center. So there are reports that they are moving into that area. Some reports say they are moving more. They are moving more into the center of Bakhmut to defend and further. Either way, as it stands right now, the Russians are taking it over bit by bit, and there are reports that there's maybe around 30,000 men in Bakhmut, with for the Russians and Wagner having only 5,000 men. That's why things are going slowly, but they're going little by little, and they're pushing that line. Now, if the Ukrainians, if the Russians can take over this, that will put pressure on two places. There's to the north here of Kramatorsk is Slavyansk. That's a big town there. So both Kramatorsk will be in danger, and Slavyansk will be in danger. It will be now possible to attack them directly. Right? Yeah, there might be this small town here. I'm looking at a Russian map right now, so I can't say what the name is. I just know what Kramatorsk looks like in the Russian Cyrillic alphabets. So these towns, I particularly can't wait for Slavyansk to fall. Yeah, I can't wait for Slavyansk to fall. But taking over Bakhmut will be a big deal. Now, it would be more operational defeat than strategic, because there are more forces in Kramatorsk and there are more forces in Slavyansk. I know some people have stated that it would be a strategic defeat. It's not going to be a strategic defeat, because if the Ukrainians these places are built up with a lot of defenses, and Bakhmut, Solidar, and Siversk, they probably have deep defense and layer defense built in there. Maybe that's not necessarily the case in Kramatorsk or Slavyansk. I've heard it's not so built up per se, like in the ground. Maybe that's not the case. But here's the thing. Those are big cities. So if the Ukrainians decide to defend it, if they decide to defend it and say, you know what, and like they did in Mariupol, say, you know what, we will fight every square, every block by block, we'll defend every block, and they will have to destroy the cities, then that's what's going to have to happen. They will have to fight to, They will have to the Russians will have to go in there, and it's going to be bloody. It's going to be another Mariupol. So that's what's happening in this area, this part of town. Let's move on now to the Zaporizhia area. Okay, so we're now in the Zaporizhia area. This is Zaporizhia. This is the Zaporizhia, the main city. This is the whole Zaporizhia region. So Ukrainians still have these areas, and if you see here, you got Ukrainian and reinforcements here. They redeploy reinforcements to Kamishivaka in that area. What the Ukrainians want to do here, they want to get to Berdyansk, get back to the Azov Sea, and they want to get to Melitopol. Doing this will cut the land bridge from Russia to Crimea. That's part of their intention. Here's the city in Oda. This is where the nuclear power plant is, and the Ukrainians keep shelling it from Nikopol area, and they've made several attempts to try to land forces here to breach that area. Maybe some of the reasons why they attacked in the Kherson area to Zolta Balka, maybe they want to have another access from which to try to land forces here to go and seize the nuclear power plant at Enohoda. My bet is they're going to keep trying to do this, and they have tried several times this just in this October month. They have tried several times. I think some 30 boats they tried to use to land forces, and they got massacred. They have also made attempts here to attack. Let me get this back. They've made attempts here to attack these areas, to attack through these areas, but every time they have tried that, it has failed. There's report that there's another about maybe, I mean, these numbers where they're coming from, I don't know, but these are some of the numbers to see on the different Russian telegram channels that the Ukrainians may have about maybe 40,000 troops in this area trying to preparing some kind of counteroffensive to move down into Zaporizhia and go down to Berdyansk and to Melitopol. There's also a report that it got about another 30 up there around the Kupiansk and Zabatovo Kremenaya area. Now, how true this is, I don't know, but the Ukrainians have a lot of manpower, and they've been trying to use that advantage lately. And so far, when the Russians decide that they're going to defend an area, the Ukrainians can come there. But then, because of the manpower advantage, so sometimes the Russians will give up area rather than sit there and let the men die. They would give up areas, let the Ukrainians come there, and then retake it another time when they got a better manpower advantage. This will lead me now to go down to the Kherson area, which most of the activity has been happening. And General Sergei Surovikin, who is the new commander of the overall commander of Russian forces in these special military operations, he made a statement that he's going hard choices are going to be made when it comes to Kherson. So that tells me that it's possible that the Russians, based on battle strategy, could give up the west bank of Kherson, and if need be, they want to have that option. So that's part of the reason they have been evacuating people from there. It's not going to be politically a good move. And I, being a military person, don't care much about the political stuff. Except in this case, I think it would be a bad move to totally lose, to give up that that territory totally. But as far as the general is saying, the areas they're going to give up are going to be they're going to fight for the city and make the Kherson city a fortress. But let's get to that. Let me move on to that map, and then we can talk a little bit more about Kherson. So this is the Kherson area, and the Ukrainians have launched uh, various attacks in this area. This one here is from 11, I think, beginning on the 11. That was the first attack. Piakat, Piakatki or something like that. That's area here. They have tried to breach this area several times, and coming from David Broad and from this area to go ahead because they wanted to come here to see Sukhanovo and cut Russian forces off here from Malovo. Part of the reason is there are Russian forces here around the Docheny area that are protecting. Right here, there's a little reservoir right there. So they have made attempts in this area, but they haven't been successful. So since the 11th, though, the 11 they came, they got brutalized about what about maybe 200 or so people they lost. But they came in, apparently in this whole area, by the way, let me go back. In this whole area, they're trying to attack that the Ukrainian forces is thought to be around 60,000. However, these attacks that they have made so far have not been with around 60,000 men. Each attempt, I think they have made 3 now so far, has been around about 1,000 men or so, about a regiment size, or more so you would say two battalions in size. Now, why they're using that small of a forces, it could be some type of I would say more positional attempts than what I would say. This is not recon by force because those numbers are too much for recon by force, or recon by fire. They're too much to send into battle like that just to do recon. But again, the Ukrainians have their own methodology on how they do things, and it's for the NATO and U.S. and British generals, they have expendable men to play with, so they can try that. But I think more they were positional battles because, again, what they want to try to do is that in these areas, if they can go ahead and wedge themselves in gaps that form in the defensive line. So you got this whole defensive line. The Russians had all these areas before, but all these areas here they had them before. But there were a lot of lines, a lot of gaps in those lines. So the Russians had to pull back, giving us Zolota, Balka. They had to pull all the way down to this area, and then they formed the new defensive lines along here. So they want to try now to break through these gaps. If they can wedge themselves in a gap, as the Russians trying to fight them in that one area, then they will wedge themselves in other places. Again, always trying to cut at, instead of attacking a place full on, they attack it in the gaps. And that's smart. That's a classic NATO strategy, right? So when you have a gap, a defensive gap, that means generally it means two different units are protecting that gap, and you want to go in between there. Hopefully, good. It doesn't work against good trained military, but if they're not so trained and they're not on the P's and Q's, going in between two units can cause problems. As sometimes whose responsibility is this. They can be they might have problems with that. So it's not a bad way to go. Except for the Russians, sometimes these gaps that they leave is purposeful. They they will they will they will set up artillery and points along those lines that they and then pull off from there. Leave that little place open. All that area has been marked and ranged by artillery. So when you come there in that area, then they would just ambush you and kill you with artillery. And this is what's happening to the Ukrainians all the time. So three times now they have come through this and try to come through this area. The latest one, they came all the way to Sukhanovo, and the Russians bypassed them. And for a period of time, there were a lot of Ukrainians caught up in sort of a cauldron. I would say a tactical cauldron, and a few of them pulled out, but then some were captured. About 18 of them got captured, and a lot of weapons were. They lost a lot of equipment. So these three attempts they have made so far has been with only about 1,000 men each time. Now, if truly they do have about 60,000 men to put on this, they're going to have to do it soon, because there's report that part of the reason why they keep they got to attack this area is because to give Biden a win for the elections coming up. The November elections, I think November 8th. So they have to apparently go ahead and try to make some good advance into Kherson, recapture Kherson City, to be able to give that win, and hopefully that would then give Biden a bounce in the polls, and the Democrats will win, and then it would keep funding the Ukrainian war. I mean, if that's true, that's just messed up. To plan a military action with the lives of men in jeopardy based on some political gains, especially not even your own political gains for some other country. That's kind of tough. But just going on to the bigger thing about whether the Republicans taking over will stop the flow of funds to Ukraine. No, I mean, some people think so, and there's a whole lot of talk on mainstream media that the Republicans are threatening to cut off funds. I don't think that will happen. That is just American internal politics. The party in power takes a direction. The party out of power criticize them in a way where it seems like to say they will go in a different direction. But no, they just want to be the one moving in this direction that they all agree with. American polity is already set on this war. They're not going to stop it unless they don't have the equipment anymore to supply, and maybe funds get dry, that it becomes a real problem. Short of that, I don't see a Republican victory changing that. They get to fight Russia with forces that are not American, that politically would not do much damage to them when those forces get killed. Why wouldn't they try? They get to try all their tactics that they have planned, all their strategy that they're planning to fight Russia. They're testing it out on there. Remember, the strategy the Ukrainians using now is this guy and Lieutenant Fiore's strategy to beat the battalion tactical group. They get to try this. This is house money they're playing with. Why would they lose it? after all, they're fighting for U.S. hegemony, Western hegemony, to be able to keep this unipolar world so that they can dominate and make rules, break it when they want, make it when they want, say who can be president in which country, who lost the legitimacy, so that they can steal other people's resources. So that they thought that somehow when they come in, when the Republicans come in power, that would change. That's people not paying attention to years of U.S. Dealings. That's not going to happen. All right. I want to show another part of the map to explain some other things about Kherson. So let's do that. So here's another map of the Kherson area, right, from Nikolaev area. So this is the this is Malovo. This one shows. This one was earlier in the month, October 6th. It shows when the Russians are withdrawn back here. I don't know if the Russians actually came that far down to Piatikaki. I knew they always had Docheny, so I don't know where this map is around there. But the Russians always had Docheny, and at least part of Docheny. They had the southern part of Docheny. So, but anyways, the point of this map though is what I want to show is that if the Ukrainians do have 60,000 men that they're going to try to attack Kherson, which they have to do pretty soon, they're going to have to attack on several different fronts. They may attack on several different fronts. We know they've been trying a lot in this Posad-Prokhovsky area, this area right here, Posad-Prokhovsky around, and then also around Ternovo Podi. They've been trying to breach these areas here a lot, so they're going to try there. Another area that they would try, they always like to try Suki Stavok area. And then they will come from Belogorka and Davida Broad. They will try from Piatekaki to Sukanovo. They want to seize this area and then take Malovo. Again, this map is showing them way advanced than they are, but actually I think maybe this was a mistake that someone made here, because the Russians have never been this far from Docheny. The Russians have always been maybe at the least they have been here on the south side of this reservoir right here. The Ukrainians want to come down to Novaya Kakhovka. They want to push down into that area, Novaya Kakhovka, and then in that direction along the Dnieper River, but then also come from another direction to maybe at least three directions from the Ingulets River, from Posad-Prokhovsky, so that they can attack Kherson City and try to seize it. Who knows? They might even go down. They might even try to come here from the Alexandrovka area, from right down here, this area. They might even try to come from that area and try to take Kherson. So that's their goal. It is also a report that they're trying to blow up the Novaya Kakhovka Dam. So right here, this area here, there's a dam here, Novaya Kakhovka. They're trying to blow that up and to flood the area. Some of the reasons why the Russians are then moving people from in the Kherson, on the west bank of Kherson. Now, as the general said, General Surovikin, he's going to make hard decisions. And from what he's saying is that they're going to defend Kherson City. They're going to make it a defensive, kind of like a fortress. They're going to put in all the defensive apparatus there to be able to make sure that place gets safe. But these areas may be fair game. They may giving military strategies and operational art. They may give up these some of these areas to push back down, and then let the Ukrainians extend their forces and then destroy them. But each time as they push down, they're not going to just run and leave. The Ukrainians are going to have to bring significant amount of forces to be able to have the Russians pull back. But what's going to happen as they come, the Russians going to bloody them, and then keep withdrawing to save men. It's conservation of your forces to save men until they overextend themselves. Then the Russians going to probably cut them off and try to capture that whole unit in a big swoop. So that's part of what they're doing there. So as far as I have learned, the Russians have reinforced this area. They have reinforced at least Kherson City, and they have reinforced other areas along the line with tanks and other and Russian forces. Before, you have mostly the VDV, the airborne units that were holding these areas. They're very capable elite infantry forces, and they did a good job, and they can do a good job. But they did not have tanks, all the heavy weapons. So now Russia has moved more forces in there. There's report that there are about before it was around 20,000 men there, 20,000 in the whole Kherson area. There was around 25,000, 10 on the west bank, 15 on the east as reserves. But now it's been reported that more of the Russian army have moved into this area here, so that you have about 30,000 men here. Now, so those guys are going to have to fight here. So even if the Ukrainians have 60,000 men, right? The correlation of forces does not suit them on the attack, anyways, because you got you need 3-to-1 advantage. So if the Russians do have 30,000 men there, it will be good for you to put about 90,000 men in that attack to give you a better chance. Not that you having that advantage is going to do much to you. And so far we have seen here, it doesn't do much for the Ukrainians because the Russians are trained, they got the weapons, and they got capable men. So it hasn't done much for them, but it will be good. Now, I think the 60,000 could have been right because that would have been a 3-to-1 advantage if the Russians did have about 25,000 men in the whole of Kherson with 10 on that side. With 60,000, that would have been that you could have forced certain areas, and that's part of the reason why the Russians had to leave a lot of these places here and pull down. So the Russians were all the way here to Vaso Kopelier, all the way here. That's where their forces were, but they had to pull all the way down with those 10,000 men. They couldn't defend that whole geography, so they had to pull and shorten out their lines, their defensive lines. So that's what's happening in Kherson. I'm going to now go and show the results of some of the battle that have happened in Kherson. So pretty much we're going to the tip of the telegram. This is a result of some of the Ukrainian probing in the Kherson area, a Kivoro direction. So that will be coming from the Docheny side of things. And this is some of the results.
Укропские трофеи, нахуй. Он, блядь, старик, ебать, на Деда Мороза похож, блядь.
They got fucked up.
Повоевать решили гондоны, нахуй. Давайте повоюем, пидорасы.
So after that battle, those were some of the ones there. Yeah, man.
Блядь, пленных, блядь, человек 6.
If you see the ground, trees chopped, burnt areas, you know that I mean, the artillery that was put in that area was a
Пидорасов
lot.
разъебали сегодня. Разъебали. Ну, это старые сигареты. Видно. О, карточка. Спасибо.
This one is not in the Kherson area. It's in the Zaporizhia area, but I just wanted to give you guys a sense of what these Ukrainians are coming under. The type of fire they're coming under from the Russians.
Так вот, блядь, сидим нахуй. Помахайте ручками. И я тоже, блядь. Ой, сука. Сейчас, если получится, еще нахуй звук, ебать. Сука, руки трусятся, пизда, нахуй.
I think he heard something now. Now, so you see, that was artillery. That's bad enough. They are relatively safe in that area. I don't think those guys died. Maybe they got concocted a little bit. But imagine now if the Russians were using the Solsem York, the TOS 1, they would be dead because what hit them just now is regular artillery. That, unless the shrapnel just collapsed their bunker and hit them, they could survive because there's dirt. That's why you use dirt to protect you in defensive positions. But with the TOS 1, that turns the whole air into fire. It sucks up the oxygen, so you'll be dead. But anyway, that's I wanted to show. Here are some destructions from airborne. This one is the evacuation of some, Ukrainian forces, wounded forces in the Kherson area. After a battle, taking away some of their forces. More Ukrainian casualties from the Kherson area. More Ukrainian troops destroyed in the Kherson area. See a lot of destroyed vehicles. The whole area was bombarded with artillery, it seems. One of the things I can't understand about the Ukrainians is that they Their operational security, OPSEC, is just poor. They supply more information about their defeats than anybody than the Russians do themselves. This is from a Ukrainian himself. I don't understand why they still have them with their phones at any time in the field. What's the purpose of that? More destroyed Ukrainians in the Kherson area and their vehicles destroyed. It's a tank. I think in some of these vehicles they have some bodies in there, some men left in there, and they just left their men there. Hey, if the guy's dead, maybe it's not a big deal. It looked like the guy was in there, the driver. There's definitely a guy here. This is all in the Kherson area. I mean, if you have 60,000 men to play with, a couple of hundred dead, I guess it's not a big deal, except that you're wasting men's lives. Kherson is a hard place to attack, though, because it is flat steps. There's no bushes and stuff like that, like in Kharkov. Some Russian tank forces on the move, attacking Ukrainian areas. Again, this is in the Kherson area. You see that plain field? That's why it's tough for the Ukrainians to attack, because it's just open steppe, and the Russian has artillery advantage, tank advantage. They have over area and surveillance advantage, all of that. We'll end this update with footage of a Ukrainian fighter jet trying to chase down a cruise missile, a Russian cruise missile. And when the fighter jet fired its air-to-air missile, the missile malfunctioned and just pretty much fell down from the sky. That is symptomatic of some of the problems that the Ukrainians are facing now. Not just with the fighter jets, but with the anti-aircraft, because they are bringing out things that were, stored, old things that were stored and probably not updated, not upgraded with new software and stuff. So they're having some of these problems. And these problems are going to multiply. That's why you see the Ukrainians are begging for anti-aircraft now, because they know that Judgment Day is coming.
Це винищувач, наверное, вже. Ой-ой-ой, збила. Вау, молодець.
Oh, stay there. Keep watching. Yep. So, hey, thank you for sticking with me. And again, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Sankara out.